Salve Miki, welcome back to Viva Latina, and in this video we will continue our study of Latin literature by going through Livy all the way to Perseus. So let's start out with Livy. Livy was actually a historian who was born in Patavium or Padua. His great work is the Ab Urbe Condita, which means from the founding of the city, and it begun its history in around 29 BC. Livy died in 19 AD, and Ab Urbe Condita is 142 books long. Much of it is, however, lost. Only around 21 books remain, though perioci, which are abstracts, exist for the entire work, and even some of these books have summaries which are extant. These are some of the books which you can realize that some of these books and some parts of other books are all that remain of Livy's original work. The first book goes over the monarchy, and the history ends in 9 BC with the death of Drusus. Livy glorifies Rome, but this is also considered an accurate source of Rome's history. So, altogether, Livy was a historical writer. He wrote the Ab Urbe Condita, and we have some books which are still remaining, but the other ones are unfortunately lost. So now let's move on to Sextus Propertius. Sextus Propertius was born in Asisium in 50 BC. He passionately fell in love with a woman he calls Cynthia, but was possibly named Hostia, and she was a courtesan. Propertius wrote 4 books of elegies, and the first one was published in 28 BC, and the last was published in 16 BC. Like Virgil and Horace, Maecenas was the patron of Propertius. These elegies, let's talk about a little bit about these elegies. These were mostly about Propertius' love for Cynthia. His poems go from initial happiness in his love to greater and greater shame from her unfaithfulness. Eventually, he breaks off his relationship and expresses his shame at how blinded he was by this love. He tells us that he will not be moved by her tears. And another book contains 1 poem expressing about Cynthia's death. We also have other subjects covered in the same book, such as Rome and its past heroes, and fidelity. So that's Propertius. He wrote elegies, and he was in love with an individual named Cynthia. Next, we have Albius Tibullus, a poet who was born in 48 BC. He belonged to the circle of Valerius, Messala. Tibullus published elegies in 2 books. The first book is called Delia, after a woman with whom Tibullus was in love, possibly named Plania, and the second book is called Nemesis. After Tibullus' death, a third book of poems was published under his name. It contains six poems by Sulpicia, which is the only extant poems by a Roman woman, as well as a few poems by Tibullus and many other authors. Then we have Tibullus, who used a lot of different types of styles. He used a hybrid of Latin and Greek words, and he also used a lot of alliteration in his poems, as well as figura etymologica. This was the use in one phrase of more than one form of the same word. Now we go to Emperor Augustus. Augustus supposedly coined the phrase on the Greek kalends, which means never. He wrote an autobiography, which is 14 books long, but however, it's lost. So, the Monumentum on Chironum is an account of the public life of Augustus. This is also referred sometimes to the res gestae. Now we move on to Ovid. Ovid was born in Sulmo in 43 BC. So now I'm going to talk about Ovid's works. That's a lot, so make sure you're paying attention. Ovid published Amores. He published the Heroides. He published the Ars Amatoria, the Remedia Amoris. He also published Medicina Faciae and a tragedy called Medea, of which only 2 lines survive before 8 AD. So that's all of the works he published before 8 AD. Now, let's talk about Ovid's one of his most influential works, the Metamorphoses. The Metamorphoses was already complete that year when Augustus banished Ovid to Tomi. So that's all which happened in 8 AD. But why was he banished? Ovid said that a song and an error caused his exile. The song was the Ars Amatoria, and the error was possibly being involved with Augustus's granddaughter Julia. When he was on Tomi, Ovid wrote many other books and other works, such as the Fasti, the Tristia, the Epistula ex Ponto, the Halieutica, and the Ibis. Ovid died when he was still in exile in 18 AD. Now let's talk about Emperor Claudius. Emperor Claudius wrote a Greek history of the Etruscans and a Roman history from Julius Caesar's death. He also wrote a comparison of Polio. Sorry, I spelled that wrong. Polio and Juliet and Cicero. Sorry. Then we have Lucius Annius Seneca the Elder. He was called the Rhetor. That was his nickname. He wrote the Controversia and the Sua Soriae. 4 books of the Controversiae and 1 book of the Sua Soriae survive. Then we have Lucius Annius Seneca the Younger. He was also known as the philosopher and the Stoic. He was a playwright, born in Corduba in Spain in 4 BC. He was a Stoic. Emperor Caligula believed that his writings were like sand without lime. So let's look at some of his writings. First, we have the Dialogi, which are 10 treatises on philosophy in 12 books. Then we have the Apocolosynthesis, which is basically called the Pumpkinification. It mocks Claudius, and he claims that he turned into a pumpkin. Then we have the De Clementia, which is a fragmentary treatise, originally in 3 books. Then we have the De Beneficiis, which is a treatise in 7 books. Then we have the Naturales Quaestiones, which translates into Natural Questions, which is a work on natural science from the Stoic viewpoint. Then we have the Epistulae Morales, which is 124 letters to his friend Lucilius on philosophy and Seneca's experiences. So these were his writings, but now let's look at his tragedies. So his first tragedy, which is really famous, is Medea. It's based on Euripides' plays, and it's more sympathetic to Jason. Then we have Phaedra, which is loosely based on Euripides' Hippolytus, and it focuses on Phaedra. Then we have Oedipus, based on Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. Then we have Agamemnon, which is a similar plot to a previous Agamemnon, but it was a different characterization. Then we have Thyestes, which has no extant motto, but it deals with Atreus' revenge on Thyestes. Then we have Hercules, Oetaeus, which is modeled on Sophocles' Thracian women. Then we have Octavia, which is attributed to Seneca, but it's a complete fabulae praetexta about Octavia rebelling against Nero. That is a really important work that you need to know. Now let's move on to Pliny the Elder, Gaius Pliny Secundus. He was born in Comum. He wrote the Historia Naturalis, his only surviving work. It's in 37 books. It's basically an encyclopedia covering a bunch of different categories. And Pliny claims to have consulted Pliny claims to have consulted experts for all of these subjects. Some of the lost works of Pliny is a letter by his nephew Pliny the Younger to Tacitus. We have this information from a letter by his nephew Pliny the Younger to Tacitus. Then other lost works include a life of Pomponius Secundus, history on the German wars in around 20 books. We have the study of linguistics in 8. We have the treatise of javelin from horseback. Now let's move on to Perseus. Perseus was born in Volaterra, in Etruria in 34, a friend of the poet Lucan, and he died in the year 62. He requested the destruction of all of his poems except his satires. Alright. Lucan's opinion was that this is real poetry, whereas what I have written is utter tripe, child's play. So he valued Perseus's work even more than he valued his own. Then let's talk about a little bit of his saturae. Saturae are 6 poems, and they're in Dactylic Hexameter. I know this was a long video, but thank you so much for following with me, and in the next video we will continue our journey through Latin literature. Thank you.